village clerk to please call the roll.
Trustee Sussman.
Here.
Trustee Pollock is absent. President Souse.
Here.
Trustee Ballerine.
Here.
Trustee Collins.
Here.
Trustee Foley.
Here.
Also present, Village Manager Peter Scalera, Village Attorney Lance Molina.
Yes.
Village Attorney Michael Mars.
Here.
Thank you, Mr. Scalera. Ms. Haley, our village clerk, is not with us tonight because she is attending her daughter Katrina's graduation from Hauser. And I don't know if the people at home can hear this, but we can hear the music upstairs. So it's the Hauser class of 2013 is graduating today. So congratulations to Katrina and all her classmates. Mr. Village Manager, if you would please lead us in the Pledge of Allegiance.
I pledge allegiance
to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Next up is public comment. Is there anyone here who would like to address the board? Seeing none, we'll move on to reports of village officers. And the first item under the village president's report is a very pleasurable one, and it's the swearing in of our newly elected trustee, Ellen Hamilton. So in our village clerk's absence, I would ask Mr. Scalera to please administer the oath of office.
I need you to raise your right hand and repeat after me.
I, Ellen Hamilton,
Do solemnly swear
do solemnly swear
that I will support the Constitution of the United States
that I will support the Constitution of the United States
and the Constitution of the State of Illinois,
and the Constitution of the State of Illinois,
and that I will faithfully perform the duties
and that I will faithfully perform the duties
of the office
of the office of trustee of the Village of Riverside,
Illinois,
Illinois,
to the best of my ability.
to the best of my ability.
Congratulations.
Thank you. Thank you, Peter.
Well, welcome, Trustee Hamilton. Next up is I have two motions concerning various appointments. The first is a motion to appoint Lieutenant David Krull to the E911 Commission to fill a vacancy of 1 year to expire in 2014. And I'll ask our police chief to tell us a little bit about E911 and about Lieutenant Krull.
Mr. President and trustees, the police department currently has 3 positions on there. Myself, one of our dispatchers, Gene Suchinsky, and then there's a position open because of Deputy Chief John Krull's retirement. I'm nominating to the manager and the president that Lieutenant David Krull serve in that capacity. He is the department's computer expert. He is our liaison between our software company and our vendor for the 911 center. He ran the 911 center as a sergeant as one of his administrative duties. He's familiar with all the operations of the center. And the E911 board has a great deal of influence and oversight of what happens in the 911 center. So I think that Lieutenant Krull would serve in that capacity. His knowledge would be an excellent choice. I also asked the fire chief, who is the chairman, if he had any objections when I was doing my initial research, and he did not. And I also discussed it with the manager, and he also supported that nomination. So I sent that nomination ahead to the president.
Okay, thank you, Chief.
Thank you.
Is there any? I'd ask for a motion and a second to appoint Mr. Krull.
Motion. Second.
Motion by Mr. Foley, second by Mr. Ballerine. Any discussion? Mr. Scalera, if you call the roll.
Trustee Sussman.
Aye.
Trustee Hamilton.
Aye.
Trustee Ballerine.
Aye.
Trustee Collins.
Aye.
Trustee Foley.
Aye.
Thank you very much, and thank you, Chief.
Thank you.
Next up is a motion to reappoint Fire Chief Spencer Kimura, Deputy Chief Matt Buckley, Village Manager Peter Scalera, Police Chief Thomas Weitzel and Telecommunications Dispatcher Gene Stusinski to the 911 Commission for one-year terms to expire in 2014, and also the appointment of Matthew Connolly to the Police Pension Board for a 2-year term to expire in 2015. So I'd ask for a motion and a second for this appointment.
So moved. Second.
Motion by Trustee Hamilton, a second by Trustee Sussman. Any discussion? Hearing none, if you'll please call the roll.
Trustee Sussman.
Aye.
Trustee Hamilton.
Aye.
Trustee Ballery.
Aye.
Trustee Collins.
Aye.
Trustee Foley.
Aye.
The motion passes. I just saw Ms. Wyaduk walk in. We had passed up on public comment because at that time there was nobody here to give a public comment. But I did ask Ms. Wyaduk to come tonight to tell us about a nice event that we had in the village yesterday. So if you could step up and tell us about what happened.
Hi, for anybody who doesn't know me, Joan Wyaduk. Yesterday was really a great day for Riverside. About 4 months ago, a call came into the Riverside Village offices wanting to know from the Park Ridge Garden Club president if she could bring a group here to Riverside to learn more about the history and also view some gardens. So Kathy Haley called Jim Petrozelka from the Olmsted Group, and he was willing to do a nice history presentation for them. And then I was called and had to set up about 3 gardens for them to come and view. So the bus pulled up in front of Riverside about 9 o'clock. Jim Petrozelka hopped on the bus. It was a big touring bus. You know, they had 55 people that signed up to come. So he drove them all around Riverside and told all the history and everything else. They just loved that part. Then they went on to the Riverside Golf Club. They have some lunch. And afterwards, I met them at the golf club. And then we went to view 3 gardens in Riverside, which 3 residents, you know, were very kind to open their gardens, which was wonderful. So at the end of the day, it was about 3 o'clock when they left Riverside. So many of them have never been to the Brookfield Zoo, didn't know anything about Riverside, didn't even know it was here. So they all had just a wonderful experience. So it was really nice, and of course I plugged our own Riverside Garden Walk, which is June 23rd. So we're hoping that they'll come back because all the gardens will be different than what they viewed on Wednesday. So in view of what happened, I'm really going to try to promote, you know, more of this if we can do this, because I'm sure many of these people will come back, have dinner here, or just, you know, visit some of our you know, our libraries or the things. I told them about the car shows. So I think, you know, it's a good PR thing. And they all just had a wonderful time. So I'm hoping we can do a little bit more of this.
Well, that's wonderful. Well, thank you to the Garden Club and to Floss for putting that on. And I'm glad our friends from Park Ridge came to see us. And all of the other communities out there who might be watching, you can come too, anytime you want. So in case you didn't hear that, June 23rd, right, is the Garden Club.
On New Deport.
Great. And I see Mr. Gallegos. Of course.
Thank you.
We start at 7 o'clock now.
I apologize. There's a train that caused a delay, so I do apologize. But for the record, Alex Gallegos, 3234 South Harlem. Good evening, Mr. President.
Good evening.
Trustees, those in attendance, and to those watching at home. Sir, I come before you, the Village Board, on behalf of the Chamber of Commerce. It is my pleasure to inform the public of the upcoming Chamber events. Next Thursday, the Chamber of Commerce will be hosting their first cruise night of the season here on Burlington Street starting at 6 o'clock. Weather permitting, we should expect about 100 plus cars out there. Convertibles, roadsters, muscle cars, all sorts of fine attractions for the residents and families of the village to enjoy. Steak fry is coming up as well. That'll be held on Friday, June 21st. Tickets are for sale at Rick's Garage Arcade Jewelers for $30 a piece. It will also be the steak fry, which will be the site of the announcement for Person of the Year. And that dinner will be held by the Lions Club and the Chamber of Commerce in late August. More details on that will follow. We didn't have a chance last time, Gene, but we want to thank you and Raw for putting together a fantastic weekend, getting Mother Nature on your side. And I mean, just, you know, if you could have done that for Memorial Day weekend, we could have had that pool. Sorry about that. That's all right. That's all right.
Thank you.
Very well. And we also want to thank the farmers market. And even though they didn't have the best weather, they did put out a very good turnout yesterday. So It's summertime, and we should enjoy it. We have a cookout coming up, and we have car shows, and finally, good times. And that's all I have for today, sir. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Yeah, I actually talked to Amy Jasek today about the farmers market, and on their Facebook page, they're asking folks where they're coming from, and she told me that we had people from Forest Park and Brookfield. One person's taking Metro from Cicero that comes here. We have a regular attendee now from McCook and folks from Berwyn, so we hope all of our surrounding neighbors will start coming and enjoying it. Wednesdays at 2:30 beside the library is where our farmers market is held. So next up is the village manager's report.
Thank you, Mr. President. You addressed my first item in my report, which was that yesterday was our first farmers market, and it was, even though the weather wasn't the best or very cooperative, it was one of the best opening day farmers markets that we've had. And you can always tell it's a good farmers market when the pizza vendor sells out of pizza by 6 o'clock. And I was told that he sold almost 140 pizzas. So, not to mention all of the other vendors nearly sold out of everything, or in some cases also sold out of everything that they brought. So I'd like to thank all of the volunteers who do put in a lot of work and effort into making Riverside's market one of the best in the area. It really showed yesterday their hard work, so good job to them. For those of you who use the Swan Pond Path, I have good news. The village has been able to work with the Army Corps and the Illinois Department of Natural Resources, who have agreed to pay to repair the stretch of path that has failed following that April storm event. The village is working with them to see whether or not it's possible to, in fact, widen the path from the plaza area to just past the old Fairbank Dam area to a 6-foot wide path, so that it is the same width as the other stretch that begins at Burling and goes into the plaza there. So I'm hopeful that the numbers that we will get from them will be something that I can then bring back to the board, and the board is willing to cover the difference for us to allow us to widen the path. So that is all I have right now, Mr. President.
Thank you. And just for the record, the Army Corps originally was reluctant to do that repair, but it was through extensive negotiations with our village manager that they decided to make that repair. So nice work, Mr. Scalera.
Thank you.
Next up is the approval of the consent agenda. In addition to the bills and various minutes, we do have a motion to approve the special event application by Friends of the Fourth for the Independence Day festivities. Would anyone like any item removed?
Second.
Hearing none, we have a motion by Mr. Foley and a second by Ms. Collins to approve the consent agenda. Would you please call the roll?
Trustee Sussman.
Aye.
Trustee Hamilton.
Aye.
Trustee Bellering.
Aye.
Trustee Collins.
Aye.
Trustee Foley.
Aye.
Consent agenda passes.
Yes. Oh, well, yeah, you know what, I don't think I did. Michael, I have a question. I don't know whether or not, I haven't gone through it. Trustee Ballerine had forwarded 2 corrections to the minutes of the last agenda. To be honest, I don't know whether or not they made it into the one that was disseminated to the public. Since a motion and they voted on it, can we?
Were the amended minutes in front of the board? The corrections?
I don't believe so.
Okay, so you all haven't seen them. Okay, so we could just revisit that issue if you want to do it now, or you could just bring it up. We could amend the minutes next time.
Maybe amend it next time. I don't have the corrections. Do you recall your corrections?
I do.
You know what? People have to speak up.
They
It's
weren't-
competition.
They weren't big.
Yeah, they weren't
I'm sorry, I should have done this earlier. In my report, I had, it was stated, we were talking about the District 96, and it was stated that the Trustee Ballerine stated that he and the Cable Commissioner Gorski attended the last District 96 meeting, and the school board granted permission for Riverside TV to record and broadcast District 96 board meetings. Where, in fact, I believe I stated it more that they looked upon it favorably.
More negotiation has to go through the Cable Commission and the board before it is finalized. So I didn't want to put words or have words put into the school board's mouth before they actually said yes. So that was what I.
But what was your exact change?
So the change should have read that attended, and the school board agreed to continue discussion to allow Riverside TV to record and broadcast District 96.
Pending further financial negotiations.
Well, we'll just continue the discussion, right? That language.
Okay.
Okay.
Thank you.
So should we just have a motion just to approve the minutes?
Yeah, was that
As a
the only
standalone?
change then?
Yes.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, we'll just do a motion to approve the minutes as submitted, as amended by Trustee Ballerine here at the meeting.
All right, so I'll ask for a motion to approve the Village Board of Trustee regular meeting minutes of May 23 as amended.
Motion.
Motion by Mr. Foley,
Second.
second by Ms. Collins. Any discussion? Please call the roll.
Trustee Sussman.
Aye.
Trustee Hamilton.
Aye.
Trustee Ballerine.
Aye.
Trustee Collins.
Aye.
Trustee Foley.
Aye.
Motion carries. Next up are reports of departments and commissions, and we have something by the Public Works Department. Mr. Bailey?
Good evening. Typically, the village's sewer main televising and cleaning program corresponds to the street improvement program. We clean and televise those sewers below the streets that we're going to improve. We have the Swan Pond sewer main, which is installed along the hillside on the west side of Swan Pond, one of the few actually, especially for this length, that's not under a street. Very subject to root intrusion, and what you have before you is a bid award to clean and televise that sewer main. It's been cleaned before. If it stays the way it is as far as the actual structure of the sewer main, it will have to be cleaned again. One option going forward that we'll be considering is whether or not that sewer main should be slip lined to help resist the root intrusion. But for right now, we know that the sewer main is clogged with tree roots, and this is the only way we can really get it clean and operating at capacity is to clean it, and then we televise it to examine a condition.
Can you tell us a little bit about the winning bid? The company?
Pardon me?
The winning bid?
The low bid is from JACK Contractor Services. That company is, I will say this, that they are kind of new to the business, this type of business. I met with the company president, discussed the project. The company president's a licensed professional engineer. She assured me that she understood the project and was comfortable with their bid price. So, and she lives in Riverside, so it isn't like this would be some kind of mysterious project to her that she bid on from 50 miles away or something like that. So, while I think they're especially getting into the televising business early on, this is just one of their first projects, I think. I just felt that based on my conversation with the company president that she knew what she was getting into, understood the project, and was comfortable with her bid to complete the project.
And how much would it cost to slip line?
I don't know. We have the sewer evaluation project underway, and certainly one of the outputs or one of the products of that report will be, I'm sure, is going to be slip lining various sewer mains. This particular issue, it's so clogged with roots, I think it's important just to move forward with it to get it cleaned. It ultimately could, if it hasn't already, will contribute to flooding and backup in the first division. But I don't know how much it will cost to slip line it, but it certainly should be a consideration. I know we'll have a list of sewer mains that we will be wanting to plan to slip line over time. Certainly part of this evaluation study that we have underway almost certainly is going to recommend separating sewers. And when you're separating sewers, that especially the sewer main that you want to retain to use for either sanitary wastewater or stormwater probably will be slip lined to just preserve its integrity, because we're settling on that main. But I don't know how much it would cost to slip line this Swan Pond sewer main right offhand.
Trustee Hamilton?
I have two questions.
Mhm.
The first is, the sewer would need, the main would need to be cleaned prior to slip lining in any case.
Sure.
wouldn't it? Yes. Okay.
Absolutely.
Okay. The second question is, how many bids did you receive?
2 bids.
2 bids. And what was the disparity between the bids?
One was about, well, I have,
It
one
wasn't
was-
in your- I'm sorry.
Yeah.
No, no, it's a fair question because I was going.
one was $20,524, and the low bid is $11,730.80.
Okay. Thank you.
I do have a follow-up question to that. That's $9,000 is a big difference.
It is.
Could you help us understand where the major differences in costs were as you looked at the bid?
Well, I think my impression is that this, the low bid company was quite interested in getting this project, and that sometimes ties into how aggressively companies bid. If they don't really want the project, they will tend to bid higher. If I get it, fine, I'm going to make a lot of money. But I think the most significant part of this difference is that this JCK was very interested in obtaining the bid.
And they've worked for the Metropolitan Water District. They've worked at O'Hare. I looked at their website. They've been around the block.
They're just starting to televise. They just gone through the training. And this will be a tough project, the cleaning part, because of the location of the sewer main. It's not on an open street where you can put a truck, drive a truck up and down it. It will be a tough project, but again, like I say, given the familiarity with the company president, with the community, shouldn't be any great surprise.
Plus, you'll know how good they'll do because you'll have the televised.
Yeah.
And you don't pay until after the job's
You'll be
completed,
able to
so
see it.
Yeah.
that's Ed and I talked about the worst case.
Yeah.
Worst case is we don't pay them and we go somewhere else. But
And-
we're actually giving a women-owned company, engineering firm, a shot at doing this for the first time, which I also think is something that goes in, at least for me, I think that's a nice thing to do.
It's a nice thing, I will say. And in the bidding world, of course, you want a lot of bids and you want them clustered together. You know it's competitive, and then everybody really understands the bid well. But sometimes you have to take what you get. You always have the option, of course, to reject bids and rebid it, and I don't know that this is an appropriate time to reject the bids. But again, I'm going mostly on a conversation with the company president. We talked about the project and their capabilities and their confidence in their bid price to complete the project. So I'm expecting that they'll be able to do okay.
Is this the same stretch of pipe that we just had cleaned a year ago? Or is this an addition to that?
Yeah.
Okay, that's what it says.
Yeah. There's a large, well, it was a brick manhole on the very north end of Swan Pond, and that manhole collapsed last year, and we were going to have it televised because after it collapsed, we wanted to make sure there wasn't debris left in the main downstream that would cause obstructions. So we called the company in just to televise it and just to see what was in the main, and the main was so clogged with roots from that stretch from the north end downstream that they couldn't get their televising unit in it. So we had to have it cleaned then. And we suspect it would just kind of follow that the main upstream would be clogged with roots. And in fact, if you pull the manhole covers off, you can just, by pulling the manhole covers off, you can see where that there's roots invading. And again, it's not a new thing. It's this, I'm not sure how many times it's been cleaned in the past, but it has been cleaned of roots in the past. And again, if we don't line it, we'll be cleaning it again 3-4 years out, I think.
Mr. Fuller?
So this $11,700 bill, is this for all 2,300 lineal feet?
Yes.
So from the bridge all the way along the hillside. Are they doing anything west of the bridge along Fairbank? Okay.
Oh, the project really starts it's probably more like the intersection of Berry Point and Millbridge comes in. There's a lot of manholes in that one area there, right in that area, and then downstream from there.
Okay.
So I'd ask for a motion and a second to authorize the village manager to execute a contract with JACK Contracting Services in the amount of $11,730.80 for cleaning and televising the Swan Pond sewer main.
So moved.
Second.
Motion by Trustee Collins, second by Trustee Ballerine. Any further discussion? Mr. Scalera?
Trustee Sussman.
Aye.
Trustee Hamilton.
Aye.
Trustee Ballerine.
Aye.
Trustee Collins.
Aye.
Trustee Foley.
Aye.
Resolution carries. Thank you, Mr. Bailey.
Good evening.
Next up are ordinances and resolution, and the first thing up is a first reading of an ordinance ascertaining the prevailing rate of wages for laborers, mechanics, and other workers employed in public works projects for the village of Riverside. Now, Mr. Scalera, if you'll present this.
This ordinance that you have before you is one that comes before the board annually. It is a first reading, and the ordinance sets forth a wage for workers in the locality working on public works construction projects within the village of Riverside. The village uses Cook County rates, and the information is disseminated to contractors to ensure their compliance. The village also publishes the ordinance as required by law in our local papers.
So before we head, this is a first reading. Mr. Molina, could you just tell us a little bit more about what we're talking about here, what the prevailing wage statute is and how it applies to municipalities?
The prevailing wage statute is a legislative guarantee that prevailing rates as set by Cook County will be paid on what are called public works projects. And that actually is the subject of a lot of debate within the Department of Labor, because the Department of Labor has no rulemaking authority, and the statute isn't defined. The public works definition is somewhat vague, and so different administrations that have led to different personnel, being the Department of Labor, have interpreted that more narrowly, which then allows municipalities to especially where it comes to landscaping services, which have an unusually high prevailing wage rate, to be more things to be done at a non-prevailing wage rate, and so that has tended to ebb and flow. But the basic requirement is that municipalities have to each year pass a prevailing rate wage act or an ordinance which adopts the prevailing wage. And so that has to be done, and it has to be published. And then those rates must be paid on all municipal contracts that involve a public work.
And if I'm correct, this is actually mandated to the various municipalities by the state.
It is a state requirement, although I assured Trustee Ballerine that absolute legislative immunity exists for any individual that wants to vote against it anyway. But for the village's sake, it should be adopted.
Well, given that it is a statutorily required ordinance, I would ask for a motion and a second to waive the first reading and pass an ordinance ascertaining the prevailing rate of wages for laborers, mechanics, and other workers employed in public works projects for the village of Riverside.
So moved.
Second.
Motion by Ms. Hamilton, second by Ms. Sussman. Any further discussion?
I just have one point of clarification, if I could. If the Recreation Department wants to bring in a company to redress their ball fields, cut back the grass around the infields, put new dressing on, basically prep them every year, that is considered not a public works contract?
Right. Well, what I alluded to, there has been a little bit of discussion before the meeting this evening, because Trustee Ballerine saw the prevailing wage act was on the agenda again, and he's been working with Parks and Rec, and they have some projects that they want to do. And this issue of what is a public work when it comes to landscaping is a really big deal, because there is no good landscaping rate, so they tend to adopt a rate. The rate used for landscaping is high. It's actually higher than market rate. And so if it's a public work, it has to be paid. And under the recent Department of Labor interpretation, since they have no rulemaking authority, they do Q&A on their website. And it's been very, very vague, and they've been very aggressive, but after the fact, at certain contracts being a public work when the municipality thought it wasn't. And so negotiations have happened in the last year, and I actually was involved in them on behalf of, various municipalities, but they involve municipal representatives as well as labor representatives, contractor representatives, at the Department of Labor's suggestion. Basically, the Department of Labor said, if you guys can work out a different Q&A, maybe we'll put it on our website. So after much negotiation, that was done, and now I can say with confidence that where you're not putting up bricks and mortar and it's purely landscaping type work, it's not a prevailing wage project, and it can be bid out that way. So yeah, the answer is that would not be, Trustee Ballard.
Thanks for that clarification.
And the other thing you may want to know, the other big thing that the municipalities fought really hard for and got, and this relates to emerald ash borer issues, that the taking out of existing trees, no matter how large, and replacing them is not a public work. And labor fought very hard because they said it involves machinery and everything. It should be considered, but that was one of the big compromises in there. So,
Any further discussion? Hearing none, please call the roll.
Trustee Sussman?
Aye.
Trustee Hamilton?
Aye.
Trustee Ballard?
Aye.
Trustee Collins?
Aye.
Trustee Foley?
Aye.
Motion
And
carries.
Mr. Scalera, it still has Arlene's name in here for the signature page. So just as a, I'm sure Kathy will catch it. But it
Okay.
still has her listed as the clerk.
Next up is a first reading of an ordinance amending various codes of the Village Code of the Village of Riverside relative to parks and recreation. Mr. Valerie.
Tonight in front of you is the first reading of an ordinance amending the various sections of the Village Code relative to park and recreation. As at its September 20th, 2010 meeting, the Village Board voted to eliminate the Village Park and Recreation Board and created a Village Park and Recreation Commission, having an advisory role over the village designated public parks and recreation areas. This proposed ordinance reverts the Park and Recreation Commission back to a board with jurisdiction and oversight over the village designated public parks and recreation. Just briefly, and I promise I will be brief. The village recreation system includes an ordinance in 1937's ordinance number 425, an advisory referendum vote in 2010, which I believe was one of our largest votes in this village, and have determined that it is in the best interest of the residents and the property owners of the village at this time to dissolve the existing Park and Recreation Commission and create it, and in its place become a board. I feel it's very important that the Park and Recreation Board has jurisdiction over the parks. That doesn't mean that they can do whatever they want without ever coming in front of this board. They can't throw lights up in Swan Pond. They can't erect things. I mean, they need to consult and come in front of this board. We ultimately hold the purse strings. But it's very important for them to have this jurisdiction. And I truly believe that if the Park and Rec Board was a commission 9 years ago, we probably wouldn't have Patriots Park and we probably wouldn't have Turtle Park. I know that. I know that in my heart, and it's not because of the village board. It's because of all the hoops they would have had to jump through with the various commissions. And I think it's very important that those designated areas that are designated for recreation. We have a lot of land in this village, and there's just a fraction of it that's designated for recreation. We need to protect that as recreation, and we need to allow the board to have its jurisdiction back. Thank you.
Mr. Foley.
No, I agree.
So this is a first reading. Is there any further discussion on this item? Given the importance of this, I mean, under normal circumstances, if we had a consensus like this, we would put it on the consent agenda. With the board's approval, I think that it would be nice to have an actual vote on this. So I would ask that this be placed on the agenda as a separate item next time for a formal vote. Thank you, Mr. Ballerine. Next up is a motion to reduce a variation fee for 500 Bird Road, a fence variation application. This follows on the heels of our discussion last time about reducing the variation fee for this, in this one instance, to $250, and also to have our village staff try some new procedures with regard to this fence variation, with an eye toward perhaps revamping our general variation process in the future. So this is following on the consensus that was reached at the last meeting. So I would ask for a motion and a second to reduce the variation fee for 500 Bird Road to $250 on a one-time basis.
So moved.
Second.
Motion by Mr. Ballerine, second by Mr. Foley. Any further discussion?
Yeah, I'd like to know what else is changing with the change in the fee
In this particular case?
in this particular case.
Sorry, I'm having a mind block here. The application fee will be reduced from $1,000 to $250.
To 250?
I believe that it was the amount that was agreed upon at the last meeting. And that no verbatim minutes would be required, and that the notification would be done by hand delivered.
And just for clarification, do we have to use certified mail? I mean, we were all at that meeting last couple weeks, and I still don't know if I know the exact answer.
Well, the statute is unclear, but I would always err on the side of the more due process where you have vagueness. So I would, being a non-home rule community, I would recommend the conservative course is to do the certified mail. However, under the way the statute is drafted, you can make a good legislative statutory argument that would only be required for special uses and not variations, because some language isn't carried over. But the weird thing about it is that the very large municipality of over 500,000 would be bound by it, which is completely inconsistent with anything. If you read the municipal code, the larger the municipality always has the more flexibility, and this would work exactly the opposite. So it's counterintuitive, but I think if you just look at the plain language, you can argue, hey, it doesn't say for variations you have to use certified mail, so we could use first-class mail, for example. So.
Or hand delivered.
Well, hand delivery you can do now.
Anyway, right.
Hand delivery is okay now, and so that's a nice compromise to avoid, especially if you have an intern, to have someone hand deliver them.
Because there's only usually 25 to 30.
Right.
And state law aside, your current zoning code does require the certified mail or personal service.
Yeah,
So
right. Yeah, you'd have
until
to
you
change your
that.
code, right? Exactly. And that would be a text amendment.
So we are going to hand deliver, or we're hand delivering?
Hand delivering the notices.
Okay.
Any further discussion?
Yes, I am not in favor of this for the reasons that I gave at our last meeting. I'm very concerned when we make an exception without any policy behind it. I think that we open ourselves up for setting an arbitrary precedence where we haven't had a discussion about the policy implications behind this, and I mean specifically about whether we're talking about lowering the fee for fences or lowering the fee for construction that is less than X number of dollars, or lowering the fee for auxiliary structures. We haven't made any policy decisions. All we're saying is that in this case, we think this woman, this petitioner, should have a reduced fee, and that makes me very uncomfortable. This board should not be arbitrary. This board should not be setting precedents without a policy decision. And I find it particularly interesting because the petitioner, who was here at our last meeting, specifically said that her concern was not the cost. She said it's because she lives in a legally non-conforming structure, and that was her concern. So our petitioner said it's not about the money. We don't have any policy decisions that underlie this. We haven't even had really a policy discussion. We are opening ourselves up to other people saying, oh, this costs too much, I have a special project, grant it for me, and if you don't, why don't you? And I just think it's bad. It's not the way a policy board should behave, which is what we are.
Further discussion?
In my opinion, this person has brought a concern to us that is this an excessive cost for this application? And in my mind, it possibly is, and I want it looked at. But we need to take care of this person, too. I mean, it's like the person has brought to us the question of, is our process broken? Does our process need modification? I'm not going to make that person wait. Now, they brought it to us. I do want it to be looked at to see what we want our policy to be. But in the meantime, this person has waited long enough, and we need to take care of that person. So there's a difference between the policy and the person. And I want to see this person taken care of. And then to look at the policy. I'm afraid the length of this review is going to be months, just based on what the person has waited for up to this point. So while it is an exception, it's more of an exception because they brought it to our attention, we're going to look at it. We're not going to continue. And if this goes on much longer, maybe someone else would have to have that exception also. But I do want the process looked at. But I don't want this person to have to wait any longer.
Even though she said at the last meeting that it wasn't about the money.
But she's waiting for a response on this, so I think it is about the money, even though
she said it wasn't.
But you know what, it's not, it's again, it's not about the money, and it's not about the fence. It's about a fair process that we should allow our residents to have in this village. I don't care whether she thinks $1,000 is too much, but at the end of the day, $1,000 is a lot of money for a lot of people. It may not be for her, I don't know that. And she may not even have meant that. But it doesn't matter, it is $1,000 that's a lot for a lot of people. And that's an unfair process. And it's our job as policymakers to make these processes fair for everyone to come in front of this village in case they want to do these type of projects. So I agree with what you're saying, and I really agree with what Pat's saying, and that is, we're not making an exception for just this woman, and this is the only, and then we're walking away from it. We're making an exception for this woman, and we're looking at a process that needs to be looked at and needs to be reevaluated. And I think that's where this is.
I would also like to say, and I didn't say this, that given the way our discussion last week about how the Zoning Board of Appeals, in fact, does not offer a lot of documentation, a lot of forthright conversation on the votes, I am concerned about not having a verbatim transcript to look at. So that I think that's a broken piece for us as well, that we're not going to have a verbatim transcript. We talked about this last week, Mr. President, also, where recently we've had to make decisions, and if we hadn't had the verbatim transcript, we actually wouldn't have known what the thinking was from the Zoning Board of Appeals. And so unless we put in this a requirement that we've talked about this also, that a form be filled out, or that each member of the Zoning Board of Appeals actually state his or her reason for the vote, I would be concerned about not having the verbatim. And as I said last week, I think that a fence can have just as much of a visual impact on the neighborhood as an addition to a building. And so I would be concerned at not having the logic behind that to look at.
Mr. Foley?
Gene, I totally agree with you. I don't think that we're trying to erode what the zoning variance process is. I think what we're talking about simply is money. Much like a building permit has a sliding scale of cost. If I'm putting on a screen porch that may cost $1,500 versus building a home, which may cost several $100,000, the cost of the permit is different. Mm-hmm. I think that there should be a sliding cost scale for a variance, for the chance to go through the variance process. We're not saying that we're going to lessen the experience. We're just looking at the cost of going through the experience. And I don't think that is going to erode whether or not we think in the end this fence is applicable or not. We're just talking about how much it's going to cost to get to the party.
And I understand that, but I think for this specific case, what Peter said was that the decision was made wasn't my decision to not have the verbatim minutes. These are two different things, because we know that even at the $1,000, that doesn't necessarily cover the total cost. So I'm not arguing about whether the village should be picking up the cost. What I'm saying is that we need to separate what's required for the process from what the cost to the petitioner is. And I don't agree that we should be treating this case differently in terms of how the information that we have available to us and the process. I think that, to use Joe's word, is not being fair, is not treating everybody equal. Just because we lower the cost, we should not be changing the process. And what I heard the village manager say was that in this case, we're changing the process, and by not requiring verbatim minutes. And I think that's totally inappropriate. And I don't know if that's what you were agreeing with me on. Or
No,
right.
I don't want you to think that we're trying to erode the process.
But you are by
we are eroding the mechanics of how the meeting is run without verbatim minutes.
That's the process.
And I agree. I think we should keep closer track to what is said at the meeting. But I think that when a person is applying for a variance, whether we give it to them or not, the cost of when their fence is $2,000, we're asking for 50% of that in the form of a variance application. I think that's rather steep. I still want them to go through the same process. I just think the cost should be a little bit less.
So I guess I agree with you. I think it's too expensive for a fence or for something that's a couple of $1,000s. But
Right.
I guess I don't quite understand what you're saying, because
But I
are
agree.
you saying we shouldn't have the verbatim minutes, or we should?
I think we should have better than just whatever the option is to verbatim is just loosey notes on a piece of
We don't
paper.
even have that.
We probably wouldn't even have that, but I still want the person to go through the same process. The policies that we have to make, I think, are the ones that are going to address what other things like fences are we going to hold at this discounted price range. Is it
Right, and I don't think
trash can enclosures? Is it
Sorry.
patio sheds? Is it, I don't know. I mean,
And I don't think we're having a policy discussion tonight. That's been made very clear by my fellow trustees. We're having a discussion about whether the petitioner's fee should be reduced to $250. My point is, that's fine. I would support that, but I will not support, without a thorough discussion, changing what's required. Because of that, if we're changing what's required, which includes the verbatim minutes, because we haven't changed anything else from the Zoning Board of Appeals, then in fact we are not treating this the same as this process the same as we would treat anybody else, and that's not treating everybody equally.
You know what, I don't have a problem with that, because at the Zoning Board of Appeals, we have the stenographer there anyway.
No, not necessarily.
She takes the minutes for that and the Plan Commission.
Oh, she will? Okay.
So she's going to be there anyway. So whether she has all the ums and uhs in it or not, if that makes you feel better, I think we should do that.
Okay, so let's be very clear about the emotion, and the motion. And maybe it's a friendly amendment to the motion, which is reducing the fee to $250 in this specific case, but not changing, and hand delivery, which means that the same people are still being notified, but then not changing anything else about the process at this point until we actually can have a discussion about what the total policy should be.
If I can just make a point of order about that. I mean, and as our attorneys told us last time, the nature of delivery, whether the minutes are verbatim or otherwise, those are really administrative matters.
Not the nature of delivery. The option
That's
personal versus
Right,
certified
right.
is in the
Right.
code, but how the minutes are done is not.
Right. So I don't think we need to amend the motion, because the motion really goes to the fee. However, if it's the consensus of the board that they wish verbatim minutes taken, then we'll simply direct staff to take verbatim minutes.
I don't have a problem with that.
Okay, that's fine.
Yes.
Then I support the motion.
Jean, just a question. If they taped the meeting, would that be the same, or you would prefer
Well,
the
the
verbatim?
problem is then we would all have to listen to the meeting.
Right.
I mean, I guess we could be asked to, but then we would still be paying to have it taped. So I'm not quite certain. I don't know what the relative cost would
Right,
be.
that's what I'm just
Ellen, I
wondering.
think that's a really good question. I just don't know. I think that we should be able to, and I actually talked to to Trustee Pollock about this. I think we should be able to fix it such that we make requirements of the trustees, of the commissioners, and in fairness to the commissioners, we've asked, but we've never said, you have to do this. This is part of being a commissioner on this commission. So I'm not saying, Joe, that from now and forever we have to pay for verbatim minutes, but we do need something that that tells us why the commissioners voted the way they did. Otherwise, we're recreating the wheel.
And just to Pat's point, some of the research that I did, there are villages that videotape and, video and audio tape the ZBA. And it is on the village website. So, prior to a meeting, you would be able to go and literally.
Right, and then we just want to know if that's less expensive or more expensive than the
That's
verbatim
something
minutes.
we could be looking at as a table issue.
I guess, let me just be very clear. The issue for me is that we don't, at this point, we don't clearly understand why the commissioners vote the way they do. And until we can figure out how to do that, I think we need the minutes.
Fair enough.
And just, because certainly it was my impression from our discussion last time that this fee reduction is a prelude toward, before exactly the policy discussion that you're
Right,
that
and I
you're
was just
talking
responding
about.
to Peter's comment, that's all.
And so I would ask, I guess, Mr. Mars, because you are at these meetings, if you could pass this along to the ZBA, that we would like a more specific addressing of the various standards.
Absolutely. I'll emphasize that at the outset and as we prepare to make the findings at the end.
And then,
Okay. All right. Anything
Thank you.
else? No further discussion. Would you please call the roll?
Trustee Sussman?
Aye.
Trustee Hamilton?
I'm going to abstain from this.
Trustee Ballerine?
Aye.
Trustee Collins?
Aye.
Trustee Foley?
Aye.
Motion carries. Is there any new business to be discussed? Hearing none, we'll move on to adjournment. We do have need for an executive session tonight to discuss the purchase or lease of real property owned by the Village of Riverside and to consider the employment, compensation, and performance of specific employees. No final action will be taken at this meeting. We will not reconvene. So I'd ask for a motion to adjourn to executive session, not to reconvene.
So moved.
Second.
Motion by Ms. Sussman, second by Ms. Collins. Please call the roll.
Trustee Sussman?
Aye.
Trustee Hamilton?
Aye.
Trustee Ballerine?
Aye.
Trustee Collins?
Aye.
Trustee Foley?
Aye.
Meeting is adjourned.